Welcome back, punters. And of course, we've got Peter Lawrence here joining us to do the spring review of Caulfield Saturday on Guineas Day. Pete, good morning.
How are you going, Paul?
Very well.
The good oil?
Indeed. I very much look forward to your show. I don't know what I'd do without it. But anyway, no, it's always good to compare opinions and just to sort of get your insights into an area that you probably specialise in, being Melbourne. Of course, the track on Saturday was a great talking point. We started off pretty much in that good to dead range, and which probably wasn't surprising for race one, but the track was obviously a lot better and it got upgraded. And the final reading for me, it sort of sits around about that 5.3 mark, sort of that dead range. So yeah, it was a great credit to Caulfield.
Yeah, it's amazing the way Caulfield can recover from these wet days leading in. The same thing happened last year in the Caulfield Cup Day, where it was a heavy 8 on Thursday or Friday and ended up probably only being a 5 or a 6 on the day. And, you know, there were people tweeting on Thursday that Caulfield would be heavy and might not be on. And there we were on somewhere between a dead and a slow track.
Yeah,
probably dead track.
It was a great thing to see, because we saw some pretty competitive racing and some interesting performances. Start the race. We'll start the review off with the Debutants Stakes, the 1,000-metre 2-year-old at set weights. Fast early tempo for that first couple of hundred metres, and then still very solid by the time they got to the 600. And King's Gambit, who looked to win with its head on its chest. Very impressive performance, I thought, for a 2-year-old. What did you think, Pete?
Look, it was a little bit, reminded me a little bit of the day Bivouac won first up when he was a 3-year-old at Caulfield. Just got the perfect tag into the race, just seemed to be going under his own steam the whole way. Great time, big margin, terrific win. My only little word of caution would be that he did just have the absolute, it was like a sort of barrier trial, the way he was just placed there third. But certainly the most impressive 2-year-old we've seen around the place so far.
Yeah, look, I've got it in front of the filly that won the Jim Crack Platinum Jubilee so far, but still only early doors in the season. I assume you didn't have an opinion going into that race?
Look, I did have something, to be honest, I had something small on King's Gambit. Thought he trialled well in Sydney, and I didn't think the jump out form in Melbourne was that good. And but nothing crazy.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's get on to the Weekend Hustler, 1400 listed race there, handicap, fast to solid tempo there. By the time they got the 600, Cardinal Jeb got the job done. Coming into the race, Pete, what were your thoughts on it? And both post-race, what were your thoughts on it?
Coming into the race, look, I had Old Flame on top, but did think it was under the odds. Cardinal Gem was a little bit tricky. I had it second pick, a little bit tricky because he came off that really amazing win on the heavy last start, where he seemed to be in all sorts of trouble at the 300-metre mark, but won by nearly 3 lengths. He's had a really great campaign, and a real credit to Graham Begg. I know he had 56 days off in the middle of it there, but that was his 8th run from a spell. Just a very genuine, honest horse. Morvard, a very good benchmark horse to use for ratings. He's 9 years old, I think. So I think he's gone as well as he could. Jimmy the Bear probably just faded fractionally after having that 40-odd days off, so he can probably improve a little bit next start. Old Flame, I know that all the boys on racing.com got their hobnail boots on and were giving Jamie Carr a nice old kicking for missing the boat and how unlucky it was, but it was beaten nearly 4 lengths, and I thought it was pretty plain in the last 200 metres myself. I doubt very much it would have won no matter what had happened.
Okay, let's move on to the Thoroughbred Club Stakes, the 3-year-old filly set weights and penalties race. Over 1,200 metres, fast tempo here, Pete.
Yep, fast tempo. And English Riviera was pretty well 3 wide the whole way, facing the breeze. She did get a little bit of cover at one stage. Bunched finish, only 2 lengths between the first 6 across the line, only a length to the next 4. I thought the time was just fair, and the last section was quite slow. So I don't think anyone has jumped out of the ground there. I think English Riviera appreciated being back around a turn and being out wide a little bit suited her a little bit better. But I think she's gone about as well as she can. And I'm not sure that there's anything in there that I'd be going, well, you'd want to be on it next start.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to the Village Stakes, 1,200 metres listed handicap. Above average tempo here, Pete. Gravina got the job done. Admittedly, I was a bit against it in the race due to a couple of others. But what were your thoughts coming into the race and post?
Well, coming into the race, I thought that Prince of Boom would be peaking third up, but he was terribly disappointing and was probably a bit disappointing last start. I agreed. I wasn't very keen on Gravina, but a good friend of mine thought it was the best bet of the day. Look, it's a very strange race to rate because the time is so poor compared to the other 1,200 metre races on the day. And the last section's very poor. So I just don't know where it fits. I think Gravina had his birthday, and I'd be very cautious about it going forward. I thought this, I think you and I discussed before the race, when he won at Moonee Valley, had the perfect run on the inside where the bias was, went to a new peak first up. At his other 2 campaigns, he's gone backwards second up, and on Saturday had that terrible alley and was trapped out wide. The second horse has run on well from the back, Nicolini Vito, but it was on a freshen up. I'm not sure it's going anywhere. I thought Triple Missile was a couple of lengths below its best. So I thought it was a surprisingly weak rating for me for a listed race. And I'd be very cautious about these horses going forward in general.
Yeah, very cool. Saracen Knight, I was pretty pleased with the result here in the Herbert Power, beating my second pick Macram at big odds. Pete, what did you think going into the race, and post-race, how did you see it?
Look, I don't think, I think this is a pretty average sort of Group 2 race. I think Saracen Knight's done a great job, 9th up. I had him going just about the same as he did last start when he won at Mornington. I thought Perzan was pretty good, only 3rd up there, and has probably got a little bit of improvement to come, but he's always so high up in the weights after running, I think, a place in the Cup one year. So I just thought it was an average race. I don't think any of these horses will be threatening in the Caulfield Cup, but just what you saw is what you got.
I thought Turney's run was actually okay, and admittedly huge odds, but perhaps.
And I thought Shiraz went okay too.
Yeah,
building up to his Melbourne Cup run.
Yeah. Well, it's returned now 3 ratings, hasn't it? Sorry, what was that, Pete?
Point Nepean was the disappointing horse. Didn't lead, which was strange, but did have a nice run, but really went backwards, and it doesn't seem to have come up. That's 2 bad runs for it in a row. Okay,
let's talk about Schillaci. Another good race for me. Palelli got the job done after copying a bit of coupling over the head, didn't it?
Yeah.
And sort of got through a gap, and the stablemate ran second, which I sort of half liked as well. Gee, the stable's going well.
Yep, the stable's flying, and a lot of things went their way on Saturday and some very close finishes. What do I think about Paul Ailey? I think that he still has a couple of lengths improvement to come. If it was me, I'd be starting him next Saturday in the Everest because he loves Randwick. I think he'd have a much better chance than Kementari. obviously he's going to have a good chance in the race at Moonee Valley on the figures, but I wasn't quite as enamoured with his run first up at Moonee Valley as other people were. I thought it was okay, but it was a fast pace and he ran on okay. I thought the fact that I thought a little bit of caution in the form, in that Ingratiating's run second and Zoo Style in what was a very fierce pace with him, Queen of the Ball, and pressing the issue. The fact that Zoo Style has hung on there and only been beaten a length and a half, I thought he went pretty well as he can go. So I'd say Paul Ailey's still got a couple of lengths up his sleeve.
Okay, so I've got Paul Ailey sort of going, well, not going to its well, in terms of racetrack performances, I think it's probably one of its best, and but yeah, it hasn't really made the sort of improvement that you might think it could off some of that early form. But Ingratiating seems like it's come back really well and has gone to a slight new peak for me. Okay, let's move on to the race 7.
I'd give with Ingratiating is he does seem to be a fresh horse, and whether he can improve on what he's been doing those 2 runs, I'm not sure.
Okay, let's move on to the Might and Power. We saw Animo get the chocolates in a fairly tight finish. There was a below average tempo here, so no real pressure, as often is the case in some of these weight for age races.
Yep.
I must admit I was a bit surprised with Animo being as short as it was. But what did you think, Pete?
Look, I marked him about a 2-to-1 chance, but was slightly cautious by the fact that he'd been lame last start. I figured that he might still have a little bit of improvement to come. I thought it was before the race, I thought it was tricky. I was disappointed with I'm Thunderstruck in the Underwood, especially his last 100 metres, and I was cautious about him at the 2,000. But that definitely proved not to be the case. He's run that 2,000 metres very strongly. In fact, I've got him a very fractional new peak for him. So I think I'm Thunderstruck might have a little bit of improvement to come as well. Same with Zaki, maybe only talking, a half a kilo improvement, but maybe if he's ridden a little bit more aggressively and he draws inside Alligator Blood will be better for him, where he can get to the rail and start to up the tempo. I thought Mr. Brightside was okay. And, they talk about putting blinkers on him in the Cox Plate. The concern I've got is that the whole field finished so close, and the horses like Benno, Nonconformist and Mwanga weren't losing ground on the other horses in the last 200 metres. But having said that, where else do you go for the Cox Plate? This is clearly the form, apart from the international horse whose name just escapes me. But I don't think he's a diamond bike in the Cox Plate Animo. And I do think is some slight concern that he did crab around that turn a little bit, and possibly did in the Cox Plate last year too. So maybe he's not quite as effective there as he is in Sydney, but it was a great run. On the turn, you wouldn't have taken 10-to-1. He seemed to be dropping away. But I thought I'm Thunderstruck was very, very brave late and really was matching it with Animo in the last 50 metres.
Yeah, last 200 metre sectional, but the winner was about 3.2 above. So, and from a race point of view, about 1.2 above. So, yeah, it was certainly solid enough. Interesting point from John Walter this morning when we talked about Alligator Blood and whether or not it can actually, run well in a Cox Plate. He's thinking that, they might have worked out now the fact that, Zaki and Alligator Blood sort of competing against each other may not be the best idea up front, and that they might actually take a sit on Alligator Blood and it could perform better, as could Zaki. But, it's going to be an interesting race. I just think 10-to-9 Animo at this point in time in an all-in is pretty short.
Oh, it's crazy. And I thought Benno and Nonconformist ran very well from a Caulfield Cup point of view. Having said that, if you're backing Benno in the Caulfield Cup, he has only won one race, and that's a Nowra maiden. So that's got to be some little concern. Nonconformist ran second last year to incentivise, so he's on track. But yeah, an interesting race. Interesting. We'll know more after they all run next start. We'll be able to say, I told you so, somehow.
Indeed. Caulfield Guineas, above average tempo, sort of average by the time they got to the 600. Overall time was pretty poor, I thought, Pete. And this race, I think, is well below sort of some of the Caulfield Guineas we've seen. Very bunch finish, isn't it? Like six and 3/4 lengths between first and last. And I think there's about 8 or 9 horses there within 2 lengths. What did you think going into the race and post-race? What are you saying?
Look, I thought Golden Mile was a moral going into the race, and I've got him going backwards about 3 lengths on his Golden Rose run, which was just enough to hang on and win. I'd be surprised. I see he's favourite for the Spring Champion Stakes in Sydney. I'd be surprised if they press on there. I thought he just had a perfect run. Everything worked out ideally for him, and he's just scraped home. And the fact that it is such a bunch finished with horses with really exposed form, like Tijuana and Berkeley Square, it's very hard to rate the race much higher than I have. I thought the second and the third horses are definitely the two with the most upside going forward. And I'd be going to the Spring Champion Stakes with them, Elliptical and Osipenko.
Yeah,
particularly the third horse. I suspect he's still got quite a bit up his sleeve. But it was definitely a weaker than average Caulfield Guineas. Yeah,
for sure. In the Toorak, of course, we you and I were reasonably happy here. I suppose we got the favourite beat. I Wish I Win, which was you and I both talked about this Saturday, thinking how's this thing? 6-4. What did it start? 5-4 on the totes. Given the Bandersnatch sort of lead there, I mean, Bandersnatch was already a length or so behind it, wasn't it? And you wouldn't. What price would Bandersnatch be in that race on Saturday?
It's a very interesting thing. I don't know why this is, because the conventional opinion is that the huge players like Jelco make the SP. That's what everyone believes, but I just know that if this race was a Group 1 race run in Sydney, there's no way I Wish I Win would have been 5-4. He just seemed so short, and the support was there for him late. So, look, I just thought it doing the post-race analysis, it just seemed to fit in perfectly for me. I thought that Tuvalu went about 2 lengths better than he did first up, to a slight new peak, about a length new peak. I thought Law of Indices went, a couple of lengths better than he did first up. Military Expert and Gentleman Roy I've got going exactly the same as they did at Sandown. And look, I've got I Wish I Win going exactly the same as he did at Sandown. So, look, if he'd have made that 2 lengths improvement that everyone was banking on third up, he probably would have won. But he didn't do that, and he had the very bad draw and had to go back. I don't know what to make of Pinstripe. He just has ridden so negatively all the time. Like, you couldn't have, it'd be hard to imagine how you could have got any further back on Saturday. I think he might have been second last or last and 15 lengths off the lead.
It was about 10 lengths off him at the 800, Pete.
It's just crazy. He ran home well, but, horses don't have 6 or 7 runs in them a lot of the time, and he's spent these first 3 runs this time in really being put into positions where he's not going to be competitive on the line.
Any of those horses that made ground in that race, Pete, were flattered, because I mean that last 200 from a race rating point of view was like 4.5 lengths below standard, and the last 400 6.6 lengths below standard. So they were flattered. Those horses. So, horses like Gentleman Roy, who really did a stack of work, pace-wise. I mean, its run was pretty good.
Yeah.
And even Military Expert to a certain extent. So, look, the favourite had its chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And Military Expert would be a great horse to aim at the Waterford Crystal Mile, although unfortunately, like everything else, they've decided to make it a weight for age race for some reason and get the small fields all the time. But that's his race, the Waterford Crystal Mile, back to Moonee Valley, where I've got him going way better than he has on any other occasion, especially if he gets a bit of sting out of the ground.
Okay, let's talk about the Northwood Plume. Geez, hard to make sense of this time, but and certainly makes sense of the winner's performance, Literary Magnate, but solid to above average tempo here. Pete, what do we say about this?
Well, the time is incredible. I don't know whether the wind has suddenly blown up in the middle of the race and blown them home, but it's very, very hard to reconcile that it's run nearly 5 lengths faster than Gravina and 5 lengths faster for the last 600 metres of the race. It has to be said that no matter what you do, it's just returned in a new peak for Literary Magnate. Now, he has shown in the past that perhaps he's best early in his campaign, but he also has done quite well over a mile. So obviously in for a good preparation and was well backed. So he has started shorter in this race than Written Beauty and Desert Rain, who are both quality horses, with Zapateo obviously very short, starting 8 to 11 or something. I think this is a very, very strong form race, and I'd be taking the time pretty much on pretty close to face value, and I'd want to be following the first 3 across the line for sure. I think they can all win. They can all be worth. They're all worth following next start.
And look, even Zapateo's, very consistent rating horse, isn't it? And I think you can sort of pot it off that run.
He was wide all the way, and I thought he did pretty well, almost as well as he did last start. But a very fast time and worth paying attention to for sure.
So thanks, Pete, for that. And what about your main horses to follow? Anything stand out?
Well, I'd be following those 3 place getters from the last race. The 2 place getters out of the Guineas, Elliptical and Osipenko. And, well, obviously not really worth saying, but the 2-year-old will come back to Sydney and run in that $1 million race, the Golden, whatever it is, in a couple of weeks' time. But I'm sure it'll be very short, and so not really any point in saying that. But my 5 horses out of the meeting would be the 2 place getters in the Guineas and the 3 place getters from the last race. And I must say, I'd still be pretty keen on Jamie Carr's ride next week in the Caulfield Cup after this week's racing.
Smoke and Romans?
That's it. I couldn't think of a name. Yeah. I didn't see it.
Well, the price is absolutely smashed since we mentioned it on the show a few weeks ago, Pete. So, it did seem big odds at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks once again, and we'll catch you next week, of course, to review that meeting. And best of luck this week.
Good on you. Thanks, Paul.
See ya.